everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, my name is Gemma and I create weekly art content. So I do lots of drawings and paintings, and I also like to try out lots of different products. So if that's something that you are interested in, make sure you subscribe. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how you can use really inexpensive materials to create artwork. So I'm going to be using a Biro pen or a ballpoint pen to do my drawing today, and I'm going to show you some different mark making that you can incorporate into your drawing to make it a little bit more interesting. So let's get straight into it. The first mark making technique I'm going to show you is hatching. And hatching is basically just drawing little lines, and you can vary the pressure of your pen to control the tonal values of it. Next up is the cross hatching, and it's very similar to the hatching, but you then cross in the opposite direction to create a darker tone. I'm now working on a curve and shading just on one side, and in my drawing I'm going to use this technique with lots of them placed together to create a nice texture on top of some of the skin. Next up is scumbling, and scumbling is when you control scribble and you can vary the tone by making sure that your scribbles are really close together or whether they are further apart, and you can create some really excellent textures with this technique. I'm now going to use all of those different mark making techniques that I have just shown you in the video, and I'm going to apply them to my outline drawing that I've got here. I've just lightly sketched out my chameleon, and I've chosen a chameleon because I just think that they are absolutely hilarious. They've got such a grumpy looking face, yet they're so colourful and joyful looking at the same time. I just think they're so funny. So I've lightly sketched out with a pencil, and if you feel intimidated with going straight in with a Biro pen, you can do this. So I've started out by just using a little scumbling technique. I've added some little curved areas that I've added shading to on one side to make my drawing look like it's got quite a lot of texture on the end of that nose. And then I'm just building up the shapes of my design on here and using a mixture of scumbling along with hatching in different parts of my drawing, because some areas of my chameleon are a lot smoother in texture than others. So on the eye, I'm just building up my texture by hatching around in a curve motion. This is going to help build up that form of the eye on where that bulbous socket is kind of standing out from the chameleon. You want to build this up in layers, so making sure that you use really light layers to begin with, and then going over the top, gradually building up the pressure that you use with your ballpoint pen. In some areas of this, I also cross hatch to define the darker shades a lot more, and this really helps to emphasize where those shaded areas are. So the hatching is good for the lighter areas, and then the cross hatching is really good to darken certain areas. Once I finish this, I then start building up some texture around the eye, and this isn't as detailed as on the end of the nose, and I'm just using a scumbling technique to add in lots of little textures to the face. Because the skin is very irregular and it has got a lot of sort of little lumps and bumps, I want this to be represented in that texture of the drawing, and using scumbling is a really good method for this. Once I have created the texture for the top of the face, I then work on the bottom parts of the face underneath the mouth, and I create a pattern here. So I use a more controlled little circular motion for this one, and then I do add a little bit of shading to some of the individual circles that I have drawn, just because some of the texture on the skin here was slightly larger and a little bit more detailed. So I found this was a really good technique to use for some of those areas on my drawing, and then I actually went over some of the textures and the patterns that I had created with additional shading, and I just used my hatching skills on top of that just to shade in certain areas and darken them. I then started working on top of the head. I added a shade in along the top, and then I cross hatched and hatched across the top of the head here before then adding in further texture on top of my drawing. Next up, I'm going to start adding in details to the body of the chameleon, and for this part I'm just using my hatching skills and I'm adding the hatching in within a certain direction. So I'm curving the direction to make it look like the shape of the head is slightly curved around there, and then to add further darker areas I add some cross hatching in as well. For the main part of the body, I'm going to focus mainly on just the shading skills, and then I'm going to add in some details of the chameleon's patterns. However, I don't want to overload the rest of the drawing with lots of different mark making or textures. I want this to look fairly smooth, and I'm just going to focus mainly on the actual shading with my pen. I'm going to add these little spikes along the back of the chameleon because this is what I could see in my reference photo, and I'm just darkening up the areas that would have been in the shade. And then I start building up the shading on the actual body, and as you can see my pen is only lightly touching the page. I'm not using a very heavy pressure with my pen at the moment, but I do then build up the layers to create those darker shades on top. I'm mainly just using my hatching skills, and I do add in a little bit of cross hatching in here as well. Once I've added in all of the shading that I want to for the actual body, I'm then going to add in some details of bumpy texture on that skin to just add the illusion that that skin has got a texture to it. So I am going to do that in a moment. I'm going to build up the darker shades, and for this I'm mostly going to be using the cross hatching technique because I really want to build up a dark texture. Now for this, sometimes it can look a little bit messy on the page. However, once I've finished with the main part of my cross hatching, I can then go over some areas with a hatching motion, and when I'm hatching, sometimes I like to curve that at the same time and then lift up at the very end so it leaves a very light feathered effect. And I find this is really useful to disguise some of the messier cross hatching or where some of those stop-start points happen with the cross hatching technique, where I might use a back and forth motion instead. And I use the banding hatching method on the arm, and then I add additional textures on top just to give the illusion that there are a few of those textures within the body. And because I'm not going for realism within this piece, I'm focusing mainly on just the mark making and the drawing process. I think that this works really well. So there you have it, that was my drawing of a chameleon, and I'm really pleased with the final results. It's not super photorealistic, but I wasn't really going for that today. I was just trying to practice my drawing skills and using different mark making techniques, because all of these things are going to help improve my drawing. If you give this a go, it will also help you to improve your drawing skills because you will be incorporating different textures and patterns. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my other videos. I'm going to be uploading on a Tuesday and a Saturday going forwards, so make sure you subscribe. If you have enjoyed my video today, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye guys.